Welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a sustainable and profitable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and on today's episode, we're going to hear from Mark Benz from New Zealand. Mark is the CEO and founder of a company called Wingman. As you'll hear in today's episode, Mark spent the first part of his career in industry support roles, and then spent the next 9 years as a sharemilker on the North Island of New Zealand. While sharemilking, Mark saw a need for independent breeding consulting services in the dairy industry in New Zealand, and decided to hang up his hat from dairy farming and start Wingman, a breeding consultancy service supporting the New Zealand dairy industry. Mark and I will talk about the process that he took to start this business and what he's learning along the way of his new business journey. So listen up to this interview with Mark Benz to see what nuggets you can dig up to help you in your business. Hey everyone, before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsors, Bank Barn. I love these guys and what they're doing to streamline banking in agriculture. They're helping to connect farmers and lenders so that today's farmers have more options no matter the size of operation. Check out bankbarn.io to learn more. I'm excited to have our conversation here today. I saw that you were also linked up with Hamish Gow. You know Hamish pretty well.
And that's a connection that's come through my wife. So when my wife was working at LIC, her and Hamish pioneered the customer solution design thinking initial piece of work for LIC. So that's how I've come to know Hamish, is through my wife. And he's also pretty deeply involved in Wingman and helping us stay customer-led, I guess, more than anything else. And like the little product we've got, the Wingman Warrant of Fitness, was born out of the skills that Hamish had taught my wife about how to be customer-led and how to solve the jobs to be done. If you consider and solving the actual problem that the customers had, not one that I thought they had.
A very big key point. Yeah, and Hamish was actually on my podcast probably, I think it was about 6 months ago now. So He's a past guest and been an inspiration to me for, I think we've known each other for 16 or 17 years now.
Oh, wow.
For quite a while. When I met him when I was in university.
He's a cool guy, man. And just the places his brain goes, and it's just going like all the time. Even when you're talking, I'm like, it's here, it's there, and he's just this. Yeah, the speed at which his brain works is out of the gate.
Yeah, he's an incredible individual. I want to hear a little bit about your background before we start talking about Wingman. So you are the founder of Wingman?
I don't know if I could claim to be the founder. The boss lady might have something to say about that. Probably co-founder is probably a better way to put it, Paul. I'm co-founder. So I guess Wingman's really a culmination of the 20 years of my working career. So I went away to university. Got a Bachelor of Arts, of all things, majoring in psychology and sociology. And the plan was to go into the police force with that, but then got sidetracked by dairy farming along the way. Milk cows straight out of university for 4 years. And at that particular point in time, when I left the industry, I swore I'd never, ever go back. But it's funny how things come full circle. So dairy farming, went overseas, and that was where I first cut my teeth in a sales type role. I ended up in Perth working for a company which bought and sold and produced canola seed, of all places, of all things rather. And that was a real big step for me, like coming from a dairy farming / animals background to a broad acre cropping was just, absolutely well outside of my comfort zone. And I guess to put it into context, one of the farms I worked on when I was at university, the farm was a 250 hectare farm. Well, the very first day when I was driving the spray rig out in the Eastern Wheat Belt, that one paddock was 250 hectares. And it's, and the boom, and I mean,
completely different scale.
Oh, just incredible. And like the boom I was driving was 120 feet, so 40 meters. and it's hard for a Kiwi guy who's used to 250 hectare farms and 6 and 7 and 8 hectare paddocks to then jump in a spray rig and do 250 hectares. I think the best day I ever had was just short of 700 hectares of spraying.
That's incredible. That's a lot of ground to cover.
Oh, it's just different, mate. Just different, but it was really good. So, I finished up in the Eastern Wheat Belt and then got the sales job selling canola for guys, which was really, really cool. And did that over there. And then there was a job which caught my eye back here in New Zealand. I'm working for a company called Agrifeeds, selling molasses and time captures and a couple of other bits and pieces. So I applied for that while I was in Perth, got the job and came back home. And I was still to this day, it is the best paying job I've had working for somebody else. Not including the period of being self-employed, like it was just such a cool job. It was dealing with farmers. It was dealing with farmers in the North Waikato, where I'd milk cows out of university. It was dealing with farmers in Northland, where I grew up. And look, it was the coolest paid job, man. Just getting to go out and talk to farmers and see how we could help them and add some value. Amazing job, best job. And then worked for a corporate company called PGG Wrightson's, managing people for a while, and met the boss lady. And at that particular point in time, I'd sort of had enough of the corporate world and the challenges that go with managing people. And her parents asked if we'd like to go 50-50 share milking for them. So because I'd already been farming before, I had most of the skills that I needed to go and do the job. So gave away the company car and 4 weeks paid annual holiday a year, and threw it all in and went 50-50 share milking. So very, very lucky to have that opportunity to jump straight in to a business that was, I guess, established in terms of the 50-50 share milking stuff, and jump straight into a dairy farming business that had assets, if you know what I mean, as opposed to jumping into like a contract milking role where you don't really own any assets other than your labour and maybe some motorbikes and stuff. Being able to jump straight into a business that had assets that would generate us cash. Very, very fortunate to be able to jump straight into that part of the equation instead of having to grind away on a contract milking role.
Yeah, that definitely builds wealth a lot quicker that way, I imagine.
Oh, and look, we were incredibly fortunate to be supplying Tatua. Incredibly fortunate to be supplying Tatua. And the farm had supplied Tatua for forever. And look, the cows didn't know that they were supplying Fonterra, but the bank statement certainly did. And that was a real key. And look, that was a real key part of how we were able to build our herd so quickly, is because we ran a pretty lean and efficient system. And obviously the surplus money that got generated out of the Tatua payout as opposed to the Fonterra payout, we put that money back into our herd, and we also put that money into off-farm assets as well. So, I mean, we're incredibly fortunate to be supplying Tatua. Incredibly fortunate.
So as you were share milking there probably really wasn't much room. It sounds like it was pretty established, so you probably didn't have the opportunity to necessarily grow in cow numbers over that period of time, did you?
No, and look, the farm was the Tatua, just to, I guess, paint a picture for your listeners, like the Tatua land, including shares, is worth around $120,000 a hectare. So like it's, and by comparison, Fonterra is probably worth around half of that. So like it's big money. There wasn't the opportunity for expansion, and we'd sort of thought that was going to be our forever farm. I wasn't interested in having staff or going bigger, because that would have meant having to move to a Fonterra supply job or an OCD or maybe a Miraka supply job. And we'd have had to milk twice as many cows to probably generate the same cash result. And I was quite happy just chipping away, doing my thing, milking 220 cows. So that was sort of where we thought we were going to end up.
If you don't mind going into it, I'm just kind of curious to see your perspective. I know you talked about doing some off-farm investments as well, because you had a pretty good cash generating machine and you didn't really have the opportunity to grow that beyond where it was. So you took that excess capital and you invested off farm. You want to explain your thought behind that a little bit, and your experience, I guess, from going from dairy farmer to investor in that role?
I think for my mind, it really came down to one thing, Paul, and that is what is the biggest weakness in our farming system. And the biggest weakness in our farming system was me. You know, I only had so many hours a week, which meant that I couldn't be looking after a residential tenant. I couldn't be looking after a runoff. an equity partnership with a third party would have meant that we would have still been a minority shareholder. And then obviously that's fine when you get into things, but trying to get out, like how do you get your money out if you need to? We looked at all those different options, and they came back to what is the biggest limiting factor, and it was me, and it was the fact that I was time poor. So we ended up investing in a commercial property. And look, it requires maybe an hour of my time a month, and it was spitting out a net 7% return. Like that's when I look at the returns that our Sharemilking business was generating, say between 15 and 20%. It had to be generating that much return because of the hours that I put into it. Like when you're working 90 to 100 hours a week between July and December, like there's got to be some reward for your labour. But because I wasn't required to put any time and effort into the commercial property, I was quite happy to accept a lower, more stable return, if that makes sense. Like that was a big thing for us to go and invest in a commercial property. Like none of my immediate peer group owned one. And like it's a little bit unnerving. Like you sit there, you do the sums 1,000 times. The bank manager says, "Yep, we're all good. It's going to work. It's going to work." You pull the trigger, go to tender, and you get it. And it's like, "Oh well, we're here now, boys. Time to see if it really works." But yeah, there's a big moment for us, mate. Was investing that, like I said, because none of my peer group had any experience with commercial property.
Yeah, and good on you for doing that, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck in farming. If they have a good business that does generate excess cash, they always feel guilty about not reinvesting it in the farm. And I think that's a good point that you just made there of where can that capital best be used to deploy maybe some risk mitigation, right? You're not having all your eggs in the basket of the farm, and that allows you to probably kind of, I'm guessing that helped you stair step into the next thing that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But those type of, you're not losing all of that cash flow that you're gaining from that asset when you sell the farm or sell the cows or maybe change direction with the business that you're in. So I really think that's a good concept for people to understand.
Yeah, look, there's a really cool book I read, and it's been around for a long time. It's Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Donald Kiyosaki. And in that he talks about buy assets that generate cash to then buy assets to generate cash to then buy assets that generate cash. And like every time I read that book, there is something else I just pull out of it. It's an amazing book, and you can read it at any stage of your life, and there's still some really cool stuff that come into it. But at that particular point in time, that really struck a chord with me. The fact that we owned assets that generate cash in our cows. Now we needed to go and reinvest those assets, reinvest that cash rather in some more assets that generate cash, and just keep the snowball rolling like that, rather than using the cash to invest in quote unquote capital gain, which is a very, very different story. Again, like that Rich Dad, Poor Dad thing, just buy assets that generate cash to then buy assets that generate cash. And that was part of the reason we did it.
Yeah. And you also, at the same time, you were investing somewhat into your herd. You had a very top-notch genetic herd. So obviously genetics were important to you, and that was something that you invested in your business. You want to explain a little bit about your concept of that and what you have as a background on the genetics?
Yeah, and it was quite an interesting journey, to be honest, Paul. Like, I guess when you start out doing something you've never done before, like you don't know. And it's that classic, it's that don't know square of the Johari window. And I didn't know what I didn't know about genetics. I could see, however, the writing was on the wall about reducing stock numbers. I always felt that our farm was overstocked anyway relative to the amount of feed that we're poking in. And I thought, gee, there's got to be a better way here. There has to be a better way. So we're incredibly fortunate to have 4 amazing people help us with our herd improvement journey at particular stages. Sort of it just worked out that one ended and then another one took its place. And there's a whole continuum there of really cool people who helped us with our herd improvement journey over our 9 years of herd ownership. So, I mean, without those 4 people, I can categorically say our herd wouldn't have ended up where it ended up with. It just, yeah, and by the time when you get into it, and I was really, really into it, I could see the gains that we could make with our herd to be able to breed and or buy better cows and get rid of the scallywags out of the bottom and just milk fewer cows that were better. And look, we reduced our stock numbers by 8 to 10%, and still did farm record production with no changes to infrastructure, no changes to the farm system in terms of feed imported. So for my mind, like the proof was in the pudding. Dropping stock numbers, having fewer cows, better cows. We obviously reduced our fixed costs per cow, because if we've dropped 10% cows, you've got, for argument's sake, 20 cows less worth of magnesium, drench, lime flour, repro staff, and then we'd diluted those fixed costs across more kilos of milk solids. So, man, we were winning every day. And it meant 15 minutes a day less in the shed because I dropped a whole row of cows.
In your mind at that point, did a better cow look like? What were you really targeting in New Zealand at that time?
So I think for our farm and our farm system, we were targeting what I like to call Jerseys with mongrel. So we're trying to have a Jersey cow that was 10 parts Jersey and 6 parts Friesian. So like a Jersey cross type animal, like J10 F6, J11 F5, J12 F4. Those cows worked really, really well in our system. That was taking nothing away from some really cracking straight Jersey cows we had. But we just seemed to look at those cows and they would milk like absolute Trojans for the first 6 months of the year. And then you could feed them fresh air and a lot of scenery when it goes dry here in the Waikato over February, March, April, and they don't lose condition. That was the sweet spot for our cows, is that J10, J11, J12, J13 Jerseys with mongrel. And that was what we tried to breed in our herd. That was a big step for us, given that the herd had started out being 100% pure Jersey herd. But after some reasonably soul-searching discussions and a lot of oxygen burned up with people and a lot of brain cells blown apart, I sort of worked out that if we were going to do it, that was the way we needed to go in our system, because financially and in terms of the cost to buy and sell cows, it was quite expensive to try and sell rubbish Jerseys and buy better ones. There's just not the sheer numbers of really cracking Jersey cows that I wanted to put into a herd around in New Zealand. But there was a lot of those little J12, J13, J14, those little mousy brown cows. They're the sort of cows that crossbred farmers hate because they're not like a Friesian cross. Jersey guys hate them too because they're not Jerseys, but man, I love them. They were the cows that I wanted to milk. And there was less of a price premium to go and buy good little cows like that as opposed to buying straight Jersey cows with the same figures, for argument's sake. So we were winning all day, every day when we chased those sort of cows.
And then what was the year that you decided to change directions?
The year, it would have been 2022 when we decided to change directions. We had a fairly...
What led to
that? My dad suddenly died. So that forced a real massive reprioritization of the boss lady and I. We sort of worked out that what was really, really important to us. And I guess to give you a bit of a background, like mum and dad were school teachers. They were certainly not the richest people around, but the most important thing they had for my sister and I was time. Time to go on family adventures, time for holidays, time to go to sports in the weekend and stuff like that. So that happened, and Lou and I decided to reprioritise exactly what was important to us. And then we had a fairly challenging farm succession discussion with our farm owners, and their direction didn't align to Louise and my direction. And so we made the decision to just sell the cows and walk away. And that was a big decision for us, but zero regrets. It was the best decision for us and our little family. And I can honestly say it has fundamentally changed the relationship I've got with daughter number one. Simply because for the first 5 years of her life, when I was working 90 to 100 hours a week with zero work-life balance because there was things on the farm I wanted to get sorted out. I wasn't happy with how it was. I was forever just trying to improve it. Her relationship with me suffered because I just wasn't around as much as I needed to be. Daughter number two had it better, because by that time we'd sorted out a lot of the problems and a lot of the infrastructure on the farm that I felt was holding us back. So I was around more for daughter number 2. But yeah, having sold the cows and actually gone back to having a weekend, which is quite a novelty, and just even stuff like being at home in the morning, mate. Like the boss lady goes to the gym most mornings, so the girls and I have got an hour of power together from 6 till 7 every morning. You know, getting up, hanging out with the girls, making them breakfast, doing their lunches, and just, you know, that's time that I would never have had with them if I was still on the farm. So I guess that was the combination of Dad's sudden death and a disastrous farm succession discussion was really what drove that change.
What made you decide to push forward then with the new venture?
Lou and I had a grand idea at 10 o'clock one night after a couple of gins that we might have decided that there might be something in this. And I guess that was in the November of 2023, so just about 12 months ago, sort of had that idea and then kicked it around with some guys in the industry, kicked it around with my peers, and they're like, yep, our industry needs this, have a crack. And so we pushed the boat out and thought, bugger it, let's have a crack. Like we're very fortunate that I can afford to donate 12 months of my life to this, which is amazing because it would have been easy for me to sell easy for us rather to sell the cows and go and get a town job, working back as a sales rep again, which would have been fine. But I think I would have always had that nagging doubt about what if we had have had the balls to go and have a crack at this. So we decided we'd have a crack at it for 12 months and see how it goes. Because, I mean, if there's one thing I'll never, ever do, Paul, and that's die wondering. I'll never die wondering. So I thought, hey, we'll have a crack and here we go.
So what is Wingman? What was the concept that was initially born out of those couple glasses of gin?
I think the concept was just an independent herd improvement consultancy, a consultant that was going to go out on farm and seek to add value first, second, and third, I suppose, because all the other companies involved in that herd improvement space are there to sell stuff. I mean, that's how they make money, and you have to make money to be in business. Whereas I guess I just sell my time, and I guess I sell my value in terms of helping people put together a herd improvement strategy that's unique to them and their farm. And when I look back, it's the culmination of 20 years of my working career. I think about the agri-feeds job where I learned how to add value. I think about our Sharemilking job where we built our herd, built it really in 6 years to be one of New Zealand's best herds. I think about my time for Wrightson's when I was managing people. All of these things have sort of coalesced together, and at 40 years of age, time to push the boat out. I couldn't have done it any earlier because I wouldn't have had the skills to go and do it any earlier. But time to put, this is where the rubber meets the road, time to put the pedal to the metal and push it out into the ether, and have a crack at it. And like I said, I'll never ever die wondering. I'll never die wondering.
Well, I think it's something that should be said. You don't see a lot of people, we're very similar age, and you don't hear a lot in the news of people starting businesses at 40-ish years of age. It's not the sexy thing to do, right? You hear about the 20-year-old founder that made $1 billion in 2 years. But I think what you just said there is something that a lot of people need to take to heart, especially in our audience. We have a lot of people that are interested in entrepreneurship, starting their own business, or maybe it's switching career roles, that sort of thing. And you don't need to be afraid of doing that at this stage in your career, because like you said, you've got the knowledge assets of all your experiences that came together, and of being a business owner before. And I think there's a lot to be said for that people just they don't take stock in when they're really trying to make a decision on going out on their own to start a new business or to start a new career, that you have so much knowledge, you just take it for granted. You just think, wow, that everyone should know that, right? But it's something that you only really know when it boils down to it. You're the only one that had those experiences that led to that knowledge, and that gives you special insights in order to make impact for your clients and your new business.
Absolutely. And it's quite unique, the combination of skills and experiences, like you said, that's what makes Wingman unique. It's because there's very few other companies or very few other people who have actually had a crack at doing the independent herd improvement consultancy stuff, and who have got some practical experience from having owned their own cows, and paid the money to play with which bull goes to which cow, who have done some value add sales stuff. Like it's really different, mate. Really, really different. And we are a bit of a unicorn, which is fine. I've got no problems with that. But look, there's a guy who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, a guy called Luke Keames, who runs the Next Advisory and Keep the Change podcasts. And I remember one post he made, and it said, I've asked some clients to come in one day and write some inspirational things on their wall. And he put a picture up of one that said, and the quote was, "I could do that," said the person who hasn't done shit. And I just thought, man, it's so true. And that absolutely speaks to, like you said, just having a crack at 40, being able to go, I've got all these cool experiences to draw on. Now's the time to do it.
And you still have the energy to execute on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think
the best part.
I think you know that you've probably got 20 years of your working career left. And now's the time to make it happen. You've got your networks in place. You've got your peer group in place. Now's the time to have a crack at doing it. I mean, like I said, we're very lucky that the boss lady has got a pretty good sort of a job, and we can afford to donate 12 months of our life to this, but certainly appreciate that not everybody is in that position. So I get there's probably some financial constraints for people. And so absolutely just want to acknowledge that.
What does the team look like around you? We talked at the beginning here about Hamish Gow and him supporting some of the things that you guys are doing. What does that team of that network that's coming around you to help launch this look like?
So it's Lou, my wife, who sits in the background and does all the branding and that sort of stuff. I'm terrible at social media. Like, she just tells me, "Oh, we need some content. This is what you need to write." I'm like, "Cool." I'm quite happy to go and write the content, but it's not my thing. It's not my thing. So there's her. There's Hamish. We've got a really cool peer group of farmers who are into genetics and breeding and indices and just talking about stuff and things related to breeding. I've got a really good peer group of just out and out farmers. And actually, let me rephrase. I've got a really, really good group, a peer group who are businessmen who run farms, as opposed to farmers who run businesses. We've got the peer group, which I tend to hang out, are businessmen who run farms. And that's a very different conversation compared to the other conversation about farmers who just happen to run a business. Because when I think about what we're trying to do with Wingman, we are absolutely trying to appeal to farmers who run businesses, farmers who are paying us at Wingman to do the thinking for them, farmers who are time poor and who know this is an important part of their business. I mean, for most farmers, it's their second biggest asset, really. If you've got the land as your biggest asset, then your herd of cows is probably your second biggest asset. Farmers who pay us to do the thinking for them to help add value to their second biggest asset. But really, mate, it's quite a small team. It's probably me supported by a cast of hundreds, if you know what I mean, because I can't do what I do without the likes of Hamish to ring up and bounce stuff on, without somebody like my wife to keep me honest with the social media stuff, without the support of the first 20-odd guys who I've got on board with Wingman this year. None of it's possible without anybody else, mate. I'm just one guy. Just one guy.
Well, that's where it starts, right? What's your vision for Wingman over the next few years? Have you thought that far yet?
Yeah, I think the vision is to keep growing it. Obviously, we've only kicked it off into the ether since the middle of July this year, so we're with that first 12 months. It's challenging and frightening and exciting all at the same time, because we don't know what's coming next until I've had the first 12 months of being in business with us. It's hard to try and work out what it is we need to be doing, when and where. Like at the moment, all my guys have started AB. There's a couple of guys down the South Island who I'm tidying up things for at the moment. But then I think there's a piece of work I need to do around people's calves. and understanding the impact of the breeding decisions we've made 9 months previously with inseminated cows, and then looking at the outcomes from those. But I don't know what that piece of work is yet, because I need to go and have a chat to Lou, have a chat to Hamish, have a chat to our farmers, and understand what it is that farmers want. Or something, it might be something, it might be nothing. So I guess that sort of goes back to my earlier point about being farmer-led, not farmer-focused. So yes, continue to grow the business. And then I think we're also trying to look at developing some SaaS programming stuff in the background as well, to try and replicate me. Again, the biggest weakness of this business is me, because there's only so many hours in a week, and I can only be so many places at one time. So how do you take the secret sauce that's in here and put it out into a form that is scalable?
Because at the end of the day, the product that you're trying to provide is insights, right? So if you can automate that or bring some other computer learning, again, what's going on in your head into a computer modeling system, that definitely streamlines things and makes your job simpler.
Well, Paul, it's also about empowering farmers to do it themselves. Like, I don't want to be in people's businesses for 10 years. If I do that, I've failed. If I'm there sucking on their checkbook for 10 years, I've failed in doing what I'm doing. I want to be there for 3 to 5 years max for guys and help teach them what they need to be looking for in their herd, what bulls they need to be picking, help them refine their own herd improvement strategy, and then go and help the next guy. I'm always going to be at the end of a phone for guys who said, hey, look, I've picked this bull team. What do you reckon? Cool. Happy days. Happy to help guys post that 3 to 5 year period. But yeah, that's not my jam, man. It's been in people's businesses for that long. Maybe it might be different for some of the corporate guys who have got a turnover of staff who are like 5,000 or 6,000 cows. Maybe there's that need to be a bit more intimately involved in businesses with scale. But certainly for the smaller owner operators, I don't want to be there for forever. That's not my jam.
Where do you see the industry going over the next 5 to 10 years in New Zealand on the breeding side of things? Where's the herd got to move to in your mind?
Well, I think the herd has got to move to a herd where the TOP traits, or the traits other than production traits, are equally as valuable as the indices by which the overall animal is measured. So I'm talking about BW. The TOP stuff is coming more and more to the forefront of people's attentions. Like, all the guys who we've got on board this year have said to me, I want better udders. I want more capacity. I think that is what is going to drive a lot of breeding decisions. And I think, from my mind, and also certainly in the herds that I've looked after this year, live weight is becoming increasingly important, and helping guys understand where their most efficient live weight is. And it's been incredibly interesting looking deep in herds this year, and we've looked at 20-something herds so far. Everybody's most efficient cow weighs 10 kilos less than their herd average, 10 to 15 kilos less. And it's incredible, and it doesn't matter if it's been a Friesian herd or a Jersey herd or any of the spectrum in between. Everyone's most efficient cows is lighter than their herd average. So for my mind, I think that's maybe a sign our animals have gotten too big, and we're not feeding them enough. Because I think if we're going to have better cows, and I guess by extension we should quote unquote be able to milk fewer of them, then I see pasture management skills or grazing management skills, call it what you like, are really going to come to the fore. And as an industry, that's our competitive advantage, is the source of cheap protein for that green stuff. But I think there is a gap in understanding and application for my generation of pasture managers. It's been too easy to be overstocked and ring up 0800 4J swap and get 30 tons of palm kernel dropped off, or the meal silo gets filled up again. Do you know what I mean? Like, from a pasture management point of view, it's always easier to manage a deficit than it is a surplus. If there's a deficit, it's pretty easy, poke them or feed them. When there's a surplus, that's when the challenge occurs, because what do? Do you drop some out for silage? Do you go pre-graze mowing? Do you go and buy a few extra cows to eat it? Like, that's the real challenge, is what do you do when there's a surplus. So I think milking fewer cows as an industry, as a country, needs to go hand in hand with better pasture management.
Do you see any other environmental related traits that the industry is really going to push for in the next few years in New Zealand?
I think the greenhouse gas and the methane stuff is going to be at the forefront, to be honest, Paul. And I know that LIC and CRV have got a big a trial going on with a specific barn that they have built to measure, I think it's the methane output of bulls and the heritability of that. And I recall reading a piece the other day saying there's potentially going to be low methane emitting animals available from, I'm going to say 2026 or 2027 for farmers to be able to incorporate in their breeding program. So I think that is going to have a big effect, to be fair.
Yeah. What do you think is the key that is unique to your story for the listeners?
Well, I think the fact that we're independent, we're 100% independent, and that's the fact that has been why people engage with us has been really surprising. Like, I genuinely thought that it was going to be about my competencies around breeding and herd improvement and what we did with our own herd, which is why people would engage with us. That's not really it. I mean, that's some of it, but it's not the large part of it. It's the 100% independent. We're not selling people BW or a bull team. Look, we'll help farmers put those things together, but we won't ever sell people them. And that has been one of the most surprising things, I think, about Wingman, is the fact that is what people out and out genuinely value, is our independence.
Yeah, and I know in the U.S. we're seeing more and more of that as well. Farmers are more interested in having an independent nutritionist or independent agronomist rather than the person selling the fertilizer or the feed doing that work for them. So it's interesting to see that that same model has really got a good reception in New Zealand as well.
Yeah, and I guess when you think about it, you're exactly right. Like, people have got independent soil scientists or soil consultants. They've got independent farm consultants, independent fertilizer consultants. Why not an independent herd consultant? Why not? There's no reason why it shouldn't work based on that.
So the other real question is, did you get did your lifestyle change the way you were hoping for once you quit milking cows and starting this new venture?
Yes.
In what ways?
I guess from a personal point of view, just being able to be more present. And I guess when you're on the farm by yourself, running the cutter, the farm's there all the time, and you're always thinking about what next. From the time I woke up in the morning, the clock was ticking. It was ticking till I put cups on. It was ticking till I put cups on in the afternoon. It was ticking till I came home. And then I was anyway, always thinking about the what next. What do I need to do today to be set up for tomorrow? And that didn't always contribute to a massively easy home life when it's really hard to switch off. And I think Lou would be the first person to say, look, that has absolutely been a change for the better, is being able to be more present in that moment instead of thinking about the what next all the time.
For our audience, could you give us a few pieces of advice that you've learned along the way that you want to share as an encouragement to them?
Paul, when I think about it, there'd be three really key pieces of advice that I'd give to people. I think the biggest one is have your team sorted first. Get the right people on your bus and get the wrong people off your bus. Look, that doesn't mean to say you've got to have a team of yes men or yes women on your bus. Have people on there who are going to challenge you, but have the right team on your bus. And I think that the beauty about having a crack at starting something when you're older is you've already got your networks in place. When you're young, 20 or 30, you haven't had enough time probably in your working career to really build some deep networks to have the people on the bus who are going to be there when times are tough, or when you need a little push and a bit of encouragement. So number one, get your network sorted and get your right people on the bus. Number two, I've written down here, be customer-led, not customer-focused. I think it is very easy in this day and age to have people say they are customer-focused, but to be customer led, I think, is something entirely different altogether. I mean, that's frightening for a lot of people and frightening for a lot of businesses, is being able to put your hand up and go, hey, I don't have all the answers, but tell me how my business can help yours. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, I think if you're customer led, you will by extension become customer focused. And that's only going to be good for your business and the other people's business who choose to interact with yours. And the third piece of advice would be passionate. I guess that goes without saying, and go all in. And I think back to a post I saw on LinkedIn from a guy I'm connected with, a guy called Luke Kemus, who runs the Keep the Change podcast here in New Zealand. And he'd got his clients and asked to give them a blackboard and asked them to write some inspirational quotes on it. And he put this picture up on it, and I could still see it. And it said, I could do that, said the person who hasn't done shit. Go all in, push the chips in the middle, and don't be afraid to have a crack. Don't be afraid, because one thing, and that's one thing I guess I'm very lucky to have, is that I'll never ever die wondering. I don't mind pushing all the chips in the middle of into the middle of the table for Wingman and going, hey, let's see if we can have a go at this. If it doesn't work, that's fine. I can walk away from it, with my head held high, knowing we've made a difference to people's herds. Actually
doing the task, pushing forward, and having excitement around it too. You can tell you're very passionate and excited about what you're doing. And that's one thing. I know Hamish is always good at finding people that are passionate and digging that up and bringing that to the forefront. So you push forward even through the adversity that you face as you go through your business journey.
And I think it's an amazing opportunity, Paul, to have a business that aligns to my why. Because people are my thing. Like I love people. And it's amazing to be able to make a business out of people and being able to help people with their herd improvement story. Like, I guess coming from a family where mum and dad were school teachers, dad was a full-time paramedic in South Auckland for 8 years. That whole service to people, humanity thing, it's just part of my DNA. And that's been a real amazing part about Wingman, is getting to tap into that DNA and do stuff with people that spins my wheels and fills my cup. Very, very lucky.
Usually the most successful entrepreneurs that you run across are very much focused on the people, and that's what drives them.
100% agree with that. Absolutely agree with that.
So thank you so much for being here. Where can people find out about Wingman and what you're doing if they're in New Zealand?
If you're in New Zealand, you can find us at www.yourwingman.co.nz, or you can check us out on Instagram at _yourwingman_. Thank you very much for your time, Paul. Genuinely appreciate being asked to come on AgCulture. It's a real privilege to be asked to share our story, because for the last 20 years of my working career, I've spent time listening to other people's stories. So it is, very grateful and feel very privileged to be able to ask to come on your podcast today and share our story.
You're an encouragement to many in the audience, and along the way, I'm sure you've listened to a lot of those encouraging stories that kept you going when you needed to hear them, and that's what we're here to do at AgCulture Podcast. So thank you so much, Mark, for being on today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AgCulture Podcast today with the episode of Mark Benz. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review, and also share this with somebody that you know. It's the best way to stay connected and support our mission here at AgCulture. I'm Paul Windemuller, and we'll see you next week for another exciting episode.